The Chargers held another training camp practice on Tuesday, and it was Donald Parham Jr. that stole the show, and he really needed it because his roster spot is not safe.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 9 seasons, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen today. And to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, Donald Parham Jr. is a giant, 6'8", a fantastic red zone target, but he's a guy that has not been able to stay on the football field. And everybody knows what he's capable of, but he's got to be out there and he's got to prove it. Today, he had a big day at camp. On the defensive side, they have been flying around, been turning the ball over, but how much can we take away when the quarterback play has been less than stellar? And hopefully, I am praying to the gods above that Justin Herbert will be back very soon.
Yeah, we know that he, put the walking boot on a Thursday, and a Thursday is coming up tomorrow, so we could potentially see him with that walking boot off and at least get that process started. And I don't think we've ever, missed him even in offseason more than we do right now. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. Sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. David, Donald Parham, it was great to see him leading the report from Daniel Popper, who was at a Chargers training camp on Tuesday, and it was nice to see him actually being the one that is, flashing, him getting, the opportunity to flash because of how bad the quarterback play has been, not only in the preseason game, but also in some practices as well. And it seems like he was the best offensive player on the field on Tuesday's practice, which is great to see because he did need it, right? Like Greg Roman said, hey, he's doing some good things. We'll see where it goes. But according to Daniel Popper, he made some really big plays, including scoring a touchdown over Alohi Gilman down the seam, caught a third down pass, adjusting to a bad throw from Max Duggan, and also went 3 for 3, and or at least had 3 receptions when the Chargers did a part of practice where they had just the linebackers and safeties going up against the tight ends and the running backs. I love how they do that, just a sidebar there. They also do the 9-on-7, just mostly working on run fits and things like that. I love how they can break it up into things like that. But great, because David, we had him on the show when we talked about the guys who might be on the bubble going into training camp. He missed 7 straight practices during training camp, missed OTAs. So for him to have this, I think, is really big because right now it's unclear kind of where his position is on this roster.
It is. And for Donald Parham Jr., he obviously played in the first preseason game, but he was back in team drills for the first time since August 5th, according to Daniel Popper. And that's a long, long time. And unfortunately, when we talk about the story of Donald Parham Jr., its potential is obvious. You can see it. You can see the talent when he steps on the field. His touchdown to reception ratio is absolutely ludicrous. Like it truly is. He is deceptively quick. He has great athleticism when he's on the field. But that's the biggest problem with Donald Parham Jr. as ever since he's been signed with the Chargers and been with the team the last few years, he has dealt with injury after injury after injury. And I've said it ad nauseum, and I will continue to say it. Availability is the best ability. And if you are trying to make a 53-man roster, Daniel, you can't make any type of impression if you are not balling out on the field.
Yeah, and to back up your point, it's 11 touchdowns on 67 career receptions. So that's about 1 of every 6 of his catches is turning into a touchdown. So
ridiculous.
Obviously, I think the big thing is he's never really had that breakout season. Last year was one of his better years, but it has been really the injuries that have never seemed to kind of let him flourish into what he could potentially be, including being just potentially a red zone monster. The guy has the hands to do it, right? We saw him snag a couple of laser beams from Justin Herbert really close over the last couple of years. And just at a certain point, you can put a ball to Donald Parham that you just can't do for any other receiving option on this team.
6'8",
Like with
skyscraper.
him, if you put it in the right spot, especially in the red zone when you're not as worried about it getting tipped up and it turning into an interception because just how much space there is, you throw it up to him and there's just a spot that nobody else is going to be able to get to that ball. So I think that's what you keep hoping to see. But for someone like Donald Parham Jr., who's going into crazily year 5, coming from the XFL.
It's wild. It's been that long.
It's crazy. It's in year 5 for Donald Parham Jr. It makes me feel old, honestly. But the interesting thing I thought from Daniel Popper's article, besides the fact that, Donald Parham Jr. having the big day that he had, was him saying that Stone Smart, another guy who we had on the roster bubble and thought it would be very, very hard for him to make the team, is actually currently ahead of Parham on the depth chart. He said basically it's Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst, obvious guys there, then Stone Smart, then Donald Parham Jr. because of all the time that he was missed. And the other part of it was because of how bad he is, frankly, as a blocker. And that has been, unfortunately part of the story with Donald Parham Jr. and not as important for him to block in other offenses. But with Greg Roman, we know it's an important part of it. So because of that, I think, and, in addition to the time that he's missed, Stone Smart might be edging Donald Parham Jr. out for a roster spot.
Yeah, and that was very, very surprising for me because Stone Smart was awful last year as a blocker. Like, he was horrible. And now let's continue. Let's keep in context that Stone Smart was transitioning from a quarterback to a tight end, right?
That's quarterback to a receiver to a tight end. Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right. And so that's a big, big difference in weight. And the one thing I can say about Stone Smart is, like a lot of other players, like Chris Rumpf, I would say is another example. He is noticeably bigger this season. Like he's definitely added some weight. He's added some mass. Like he now looks like a tight end at the NFL level. Like that body transformation is real. And according to the notes, it is definitely working out for him. And I think Stone Smart's a guy that he can make plays. Like we've seen him, go up the seam, attack the seam. He's got good hands. Like that was never the issue with his part of the game. It was the blocking. And by all accounts, he went in the offseason. He worked on his body, worked on his technique and the blocking. And that has put him in a very good position to make this 53-man roster.
And like all PFF grades, take it with a grain of salt, and it's an incredibly small sample size. But for what it's worth, Donald Parham had the best run blocking game of anyone on the Chargers per PFF, and Stone Smart had the second worst, only better than Foster Sarell, which, neither one of those things makes you feel great. But Popper did also mention, the goal line when the Chargers were backed up right on the goal line after a great punt in coverage, that he totally kind of whiffed on a block and got defeated. And he also said that Donald Parham it stuck out the most when they were doing one-on-ones at practice, and he got bodied by Tremont Morris-Brash, which that's a big edge to be going up against. Yeah. Still, though, you still got to be able to do something, sustain long enough. It doesn't have to be great. It just has to be better than what I think you're seeing. So neither one of them is good, but maybe it's just a case of you can't afford to have two of those guys. If neither one of them's a good blocker, you just can't afford to have both of them. So maybe it becomes, one or the other.
Unless you're an all-world pass catcher, and neither one of them are. So
one, I think the thing just becomes how many are they going to keep, David? Right? Because it might not be a foregone conclusion that they keep 4 like they have in the past, and if they only keep 3, then it becomes a lot tougher for Donald Parham to make his case.
It does. And what I think even adds to that even more is that, according to Daniel Popper, that, they've been kind of tinkering and messing around with other kind of larger bodies at that tight end position, as blockers. Obviously, we're talking about Jordan McFadden and Scott Matlock, the defensive linemen that they've had in those kind of jumbo packages. So, the more guys that they can find to do more things, that could replace someone else's need for a roster spot. So that's something you got to pay attention to. And, Donald Parham Jr. making plays, that's going to have to continue, but the blocking is going to have to come around. And in this offense where Greg Roman wants to run the football, he's got to trust that you're able to do that so that he can use you in the passing game as well.
And I think the reason Daniel Popper is saying Stone Smart is ahead of Donald Parham Jr. right now is I don't think it's speculation. I just think it's which offenses they're playing with in practice, right? Who is getting the more first-team reps, who's playing with the second and third teams. And he's telling you basically Donald Parham Jr. has a ways to go. And they did also waive fullback tight end Ben Mason because of Jordan McFadden's ability that they've seen from him so far. So that's always exciting. What was also exciting was that the defense dominated practice for the most part, according to Daniel Popper and Eric Smith, the Chargers team writer. Unfortunately, it's hard to know how good to feel about that because of how bad this Chargers offense has been. But one thing that has been consistent is the turnovers, the batted tip balls, all of those things, which I think really, really is a good trend to have going into the year. So we're going to talk about that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel because I love sports and I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. And all I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. Not just new customers, returning customers as well. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. And you know who I'm already looking at for tonight. It's my scorching hot San Diego Padres going up against the Pirates, who have lost 9 straight games. And I think taking them at -1.5 at +158 is a good bet. But they have been playing a lot of close games. I mean, they would have covered that tonight when they won 2-0. But instead, I'm going with this. I'm going to go with the wonderkin Jackson Merrill to get an anytime home run at +560. That is pretty juicy. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer while it's still here. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. David, let's get into what else happened at practice. And between Eric Smith and Daniel Popper, really the two guys who put out a practice report after every single practice. Credit to both of them. The Athletic Daniel Popper paywall, the most worth it paywall. One of the only paywalls I pay for, but like I've never regretted that. I would pay twice as much.
Don't even
as
think
what I
about
pay.
it.
I mean, he's awesome, man. I mean,
Yes.
it's great. And always, not to say, like Eric Smith works for the team, right? So it's always good to have both of them. I'm not trying to say he's super biased,
you want
but
the
obviously
perspectives.
you have to kind of give the good when you're part of the team, obviously. But both of them said that it was the defense that balled out. But also it's hard to gauge them, right? As Daniel Popper brought up, and it was the first thing I told you today when you told me that the defense played really well. And I was like, wow, how do you talk about that? Because the offense has been so bad that it's really hard to know, how seriously you should take it. But Deion Henley, Thomas Harper both had interceptions. Tarheeb Still, Denzel Perryman, Khalil Mack, Nick Neiman also should have all had interceptions, according to Daniel Popper. I think one legitimately good thing that we can feel good about, David, is Junior Colson being back in action, right? That is something that, the offense can be as bad as it wants, and that still feels good. But also, Tui Tuipulotu had 2 sacks. Khalil Mack and Morris Brash also had sacks in this practice as well. And I think that part's encouraging. It's just so hard to kind of feed into the hype that this defense has, even after a good performance in the preseason game, just because, we know how much the offense is struggling.
I think the one thing that the defense can take away from their performances is going out there and performing very, very well, regardless of who's out there. You're making impact plays.
Consistency
right?
Too, right?
Exactly. It's the consistency. It's them getting sacks. It's them getting interceptions. It's them being disruptive. Like those are all things that are going to help your confidence. You go out there and perform well, and then you go out there against somebody who's a little more established, a little bit, more of a tougher task. And you can feel like, well, hey, I've been making plays all summer long. I'm feeling good. I got the swag rolling. Like I'm ready to go ball out no matter who I'm going up against. But also you have to consider who they're going up against as well. So like that is an aspect of it. But at least it's not like you said, before we started recording is at least it's not Easton Stick going out there and dominating the defense. Right. And it's the defense going out there and wrecking shop pretty much day in and day out.
Yeah, it'd be great if, it was like Easton Stick fit a ball into the tiniest hole to, Donald Parham, while Denzel Perryman was just in perfect coverage, but just got beat by a perfect throw. Unfortunately, like that's not what we're getting. And I mean, the most consistent thing out of the last 2 weeks since Justin Herbert has been gone is the defense dominating practice. I would say this, the one huge takeaway I think you can take from this defense is they went up against the Rams starting offense and absolutely manhandled them with Matthew Stafford throwing the ball, with Puka Nacua out there, with Cooper Kupp out there, and all the guys they have. They did have a depleted offensive line, so that has to be put into the context, right? But that's what you need them to do, and that is a real quarterback who can deal with those kind of things and has made it work with bad offensive lines in the past. But
for a long
I think
time.
Hopefully the one thing that we've seen consistently that I hope actually translates into the game on Saturday is the turnovers. I mean, multiple turnovers again at this practice today. Last week, they had a ton of batted balls, but none of them actually turned into interceptions or anything like that. During the Rams practice, they turned them over 6 times. The tipped and batted balls, though, have a chance to be a game changer for this D. So that's one of the things that I love to see. We saw them already make an impact. So many batted balls last week. Tarheeb still had 2 of them just by himself. And I do think that will eventually start translating into guys getting their hands on them.
Well, and it's just clear to me that they're making a concerted effort to try and turn the football over, and they're doing things that just the last few years of the defense were not doing. You just didn't really see them get their hands up and try to tip passes or put their hands in throwing lanes and just make things uncomfortable for the quarterback. Like there was a lot of wide open windows for the quarterbacks to throw to and a lot of explosive plays to be had. So I appreciate the fact that the coaching staff is zeroing in on teaching these guys tactics to turn the ball over. But I'm tired of the almosts, right? Like let's start to get some real production. Like now this isn't horseshoes and hand grenades. We got to turn these into actual real turnovers. I like the near misses. Like those are great. That means you're in the right place at the right time. But I want to see the real production because those are game-changing plays. You give Justin Herbert a short field after an interception, after a fumble, after a strip sack. Those are all things that most of the time turn into points for you.
Well, another thing is if you're talking about like the slot blitzes and things like that, like where Tarheeb still did have those 2 batted balls, if he catches either one of those, he's to the house.
Oh, it's a touchdown.
Like, and it's part of the reason we've seen so many pick sixes at practice this year. But I'd also like to see, hey, let's see some guys ripping at the football as well. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a fine line because the hard thing about stripping the ball is sometimes it can come at the expense of a good fundamental tackle. So there is a fine line there, but I'd like to see, reaching for the football as well. And I do think, this is something that is, replicable. Like this is something you can keep doing and they have been able to keep doing. So I love that. And you hear coaches all the time talk about, we want to get our playmakers around the football. We want guys making plays on the football, but we've seen it day in and day out. Everyone wants it. The Chargers have actually been doing it. Now we just have to see it, translate into the game on Saturday. And I think it will. I'd be surprised if they had 0 turnovers again with how well they played last week. But the double-edged sword part of this, though, is if the defense is dominating, it means that the quarterbacks continue to struggle. And Luis Perez and Easton Stick both had interceptions today. Stick reportedly should have had 2 interceptions at least. Luis Perez should have had 3 interceptions, according to Daniel Popper. So, like we talked about, it's hard to know how serious we should take the defense because of how well they're doing against this offense. But there's not many good offensive takeaways to kind of bring out of this because it's like, hey, Easton Stick did have 2 touchdowns, had a nice 2-minute drill where they got a field goal, but it's every day there's an interception. Every day, these bad things are happening, and I just think it's going to take so much more than that for these fans to feel better.
100%. And I think for me, as far as like Luis Perez is concerned, I kind of take that with a little bit of a grain of salt because he just got here a week ago. Like he's still trying to pick up the offense, still learning like that.
I agree with you, but just a sidebar though, like let's not pretend like Luis Perez is going to be the savior. Like, yes, man, the dude looked comfortable, right? But like, I think that's one of the things that's getting carried away is like, I loved what I saw from Luis Perez. I think for what he did in that short of a time was incredible, right? At the same time, everything is, there's layers to this. Just because he looked good doesn't mean he should be the backup quarterback for this team, right?
So he's got to earn it.
Totally, but I do think that the hype has gotten a little too carried away where it's like we might be expecting Luis Perez, much higher expectations than we should have because I don't expect this dude to necessarily just be that guy right now, and I think it would be hard to.
Yeah, no, of course. I'm just saying, like, it's understandable for him to be making mistakes early on because he's still learning. He's still trying to get up to speed. Love the fact that he's a San Diego kid, though, and he's living his dream wearing a jersey of a team that he grew up rooting for. So that is really cool. But I think it's just a bigger indictment on Easton Stick, to be quite frank, because he's been here a long time. He's been here throughout the entire offseason program. Like, he should be having some good days, and it just doesn't seem like he's been having enough good days to give you any confidence in what his performances are going to be looking like going forward.
It would have been interesting to see Daniel Popper's report on Monday because, Eric Smith said Easton Stick had one of his best days.
Yeah.
9 for 9 on 7-7s, which is awesome. But we never got the report of what ended up happening once the team went to 11 on 11, which is much more what I'm concerned about. When you're throwing, and there's no offensive lineman, defensive lineman in front of you, just a lot different, right?
It's
a
just
lot
not
of
how the game's
quarterbacks
played.
A lot of I mean, I remember even when I played, right? The passing league is a big thing, high school football, right? Just the receivers versus safeties and corners, linebackers, all that stuff. And like there was plenty of quarterbacks that looked insane during passing league.
Sure.
And once guys were coming after them, it looked like completely different people.
It's a different game, man.
It's a completely different game. But the good news is Justin Herbert could be coming back soon. And Greg Roman is saying, hey, the good news is this dude has been locked in mentally, and I don't expect him to really take a step back. So we're going to talk about that and how the Chargers are really trying to not even just improve this roster, improve this practice squad, all facets of this team right now and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys that today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day or therapy day. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. And I feel this so much, especially now that I have a kid now. But the other thing for me, and like one thing that therapy has helped me with, is like sometimes I need someone to tell me that I don't need to feel bad about something. Sometimes I need someone to be able to give me an unbiased opinion and say, hey, you're not going to be able to please everyone. Hey, you're not able to see as many people as you want because you just had a kid. And like sometimes mentally, I just need to hear it from an outside source. And that is one of the best things that I get from therapy. And the good thing about BetterHelp is it's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. David, let's continue this year. What happened at practice, but also who could be coming back to practice pretty soon, being star quarterback Justin Herbert. It's crazy that it's already been 2 weeks, and it also just feels like with how many, kind of bad offensive practice reports we've had to talk about, much longer than that. Yeah. But the good news is he got hurt on Thursday. They said he'd be in a walking boot about 2 weeks, and we've been counting the minutes, and Thursday will be exactly 2 weeks from when it happened. So there is a chance that Justin Herbert has the walking boot off by Thursday, which it would be great to see. But thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen. We always appreciate you guys. Make sure you guys get involved tomorrow when we get into a Chargers mailbag show by hitting us up at Locked On LAC when we put a Twitter post out, or calling to the voicemail line at 323-524-7924. Also, as well as making us your first listen, if you need a second listen, it is the time of the season you need to be checking out Locked On Fantasy Football so you can beat all of your friends and have bragging rights. And also, so you don't have to potentially do one of these insane punishments that I see people doing for fantasy football championships that they lost. Like, it has gone too far. Like, eating your way out of McDonald's or having to stay in there 24 hours or Waffle House or whatever. Make sure you go subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Football so you can avoid all of that embarrassment. But Justin Herbert, David, could be back soon. I mean, I think the reason why Thursday is important, whether or not he comes back, is because it's really our first insight into it. We're not going to hear anything from the Chargers, but what we do know is what they told us, which is that he's going to be gone 2 weeks. Now, if he has a boot on his foot on Thursday, am I going to totally panic? No. If he has a boot on next Monday, am I going to panic? Yeah. I mean, kinda, you know what I mean? So like, it is big news that he could be out of it soon, because I think it will give us a little, we'll be able to glean something out of that. Like if he's still wearing it next week, it's going to tell me that things aren't progressing maybe the way that they thought they would. And if he's out of it on Thursday or Friday, or even if we see him on the game on Saturday walking along the sideline with no boot on, it's going to tell me everything's going according to plan. He's on track to be back soon.
That's what I want to see, right? That's what everybody wants to see with Justin Herbert. And we just don't know, right? This coaching staff is not going to tell us anything. So we are going to have to use our eyes and kind of see what happens, because the Chargers play the Raiders on September 8th. That is about 3 weeks away. Okay. Yeah. So the time that he's missing, it sucks, right? This is not ideal for any football team that's getting ready for a season that, there's a lot of expectations for.
Let alone in a brand new offense.
Right, exactly. Which is what I was going to get to, is that the chemistry that you're missing out with your wide receivers, with your tight ends, with your running backs is invaluable, that missed time. Like, and you can't really make up for that. So The good thing is Justin Herbert is a super freak alien that is incredibly intelligent and very gifted. So hopefully that mitigates that just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the part that we know will be mitigated and some we don't have to really worry about is the mental side of things, which I think is great. And you're not going to get that with every single quarterback. That is something that, we shouldn't be taken for granted. And I think the other part of that too, with like what else comes along with Justin Herbert returning, is not only do you get a better kind of vision of what this offense is actually going to look like, not the muck that we've seen the last 2 weeks, but you also give the defense a better chance and better tests every day to show how good they actually are. So I think that's another important part of it. This is what Greg Roman had to say in this transcripts from Daniel Popper. And he said, from a mental standpoint, he is on point. Roman said of Herbert, he's the tip of the spear as we're putting the new offense in. We had a great little discussion yesterday about tweaks we're going to make, so he's dialed in. He could step on the field right now and run the show. From a physical standpoint, that's a question for him. I'm sure there's a little bit more of an acclimation period there, or I shouldn't say sure, I would guess, because there is. So, yes, there's going to be that's the other important thing we didn't mention. Just because the boot comes off Thursday doesn't mean he's going to be back Thursday, right?
No.
There's still going to be a ramp-up period, but at least it means everything's on track. But the mental side of things, David, I think this is obviously a good sign. The other part of things I took away from here was he's the tip of the spear. We're putting the offense in. This is Justin Herbert's offense. They're not making it Easton Stick's offense for a week. They're not making it Luis Perez's offense for a week, because they still need these receivers and these tight ends and these running backs in the offensive line to be running the plays that they're going to run when Justin Herbert is going to be out.
Yeah, well, and like what we have seen is that Justin Herbert is taking snaps, even in the boot at practice. So he's locked in, he's involved, like they're keeping him involved. Like, I mean, I think those are all positive things, but yeah, Justin Herbert's incredibly intelligent, academic Heisman, this guy's a very, very intelligent guy. So that's going to help when he does get back on the field. Hopefully, he's able to, ramp up and, he's able to, mitigate the pain, and they're able to try to get him to a place where he can start the season and be ready to go.
Absolutely. And I'm not super concerned at this point. I think the fact that we haven't seen the Chargers make another quarterback move tells you that they're not super concerned at this point. But at the same time, it's just hard for me to believe that the offense won't be disadvantaged or won't get off to as quick of a start as they would have if Justin Herbert was there healthy. End of story. Yeah. I don't necessarily I think it's going to be, the offense is going to look terrible as he kind of reacclimates, and it'll be, the sooner he can get back out there, the better, so we can get that, chemistry with his guys, even as Greg Roman put it. You can't sugarcoat the importance of that. It is very important. The sooner he gets back, he will have potentially a little chunk of time to get more on the same page with these wide receivers and kind of get his rhythm back with them. The other thing I want to touch on in today's show is all of the moves. We've seen a flurry of moves, all bottom, end of the roster guys that, probably won't make an impact for this team this season. But it shows me something. So today, the Chargers, or at least, the last couple of days, the Chargers have signed wide receiver Isaiah Wooden, Shaq Quarterman, the linebacker, and also another edge rusher they already had in Savion Jackson, who they signed, waived, is now back with the team. But not only just that, according to Aaron Wilson, they also tried out linebacker Frank Ginda, tight end Tucker Fisk, and tight end Trevin Wesco, according to Aaron Wilson. So what it tells me, David, is this team's continuing, right, to leave no stone unturned. The Chargers are not only making their roster better, but I think they're really trying to make their practice squad better as well and have really good competition on who is going to make that team. Because every season, I would be shocked if I was wrong about this, somebody from the practice squad is going to play. Somebody on the practice squad in 2024 is going to get snaps for this team. It matters, right? Because we saw what happened with Michael Bandy and guys like that in the past. It matters who you have on your practice squad. And this kind of flurry of moves, right? The fact that Chris Wilcox struggles and he's gone, right? We'll bring somebody else and find a new body, right? Praise Aladike. Yeah. Ben Mason waived as well. Tony Jefferson added super late. It just tells me they're continuing to do that, and they really meant it when they said, and Joe Ortiz told us, we're trying to turn the bottom of this roster as well and keep the depth going in the right direction.
And I think it's a welcome change. I don't think we saw it a whole lot under Tom Telesco's tenure. I feel like when they got to training camp, they were pretty much set unless there was a major injury that occurred that kind of forced their hand to sign somebody off the street. And I also think that this is the coaches just saying, hey, this guy's not getting it done for me. I got to get somebody else in here. And, there's obviously a good working relationship between Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh on the coaching staff.
It absolutely is. I mean, I think that we just never really saw these kind of moves. Like, it felt like when someone was a UDFA, they would be with the team throughout camp, whether they played well or not. And we saw plenty of guys that didn't play well. What this team is telling you is like, we took a chance on this guy to see if he had it, and then maybe this is unfair to the guys that got waived, but like not good enough to keep around, not good enough for us to potentially not take another chance, because a lot of the guys I brought up for the tryouts and guys that had just got signed just got waived from other teams. So what it tells you is Joe Ortiz, his scouting staff have been scouring the rest of the NFL, finding the guys who have been waived and deciding, hey, that guy's worth a chance. Maybe they had this many players at that position, so they didn't need him, but maybe he can, come here and make something of that. So I love that. That's what you always want. It's what everyone says they're going to do. But again, we're seeing actions from this front office. We're seeing them actually continue to leave no stone unturned. Maybe the Alex Leatherwood stone should have been left turned on the other side. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. I'm sorry, that's unfair. There's more preseason games. We'll see. But more of what we thought. Tomorrow, make sure you guys are back here because we're getting into our Chargers mailbag. Like, again, you can hit us up at Locked On LAC, where we'll put a couple of posts out at least to get your question in there, or you can call into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924. And we love getting your guys' voices on the show, like good old-fashioned AM sports radio when I grew up listening to. So we love that and love getting you guys involved. So make sure you guys hit us up. And to make sure that you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. You can also find the show every day on our personal Twitter accounts. You can find me at Dan Talk Sports, David at Dro Talk SD. You can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. We know there's a padded practice tomorrow. You'll also be getting into our Chargers mailbag tomorrow. Lots of great stuff going on before we get into this preseason game this weekend. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.